Hey guys, thanks for tuning into CMTEQ channel. This is tutorial number 18 on our series of learning C programming by coding. Now in this tutorial, we're going to see how to compute a factorial of a number using C. Now this tutorial is very similar to the previous one where we compute the sum of natural numbers. The previous one, that is tutorial number 17. But in this one, the factorial of a number, instead of it being the sum, it's then the multiplication of the series of the number until the point where we reach the said number. In that, the factorial of a number is then given below. So factorial of n is then 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, okay, all the way until we reach n, which is the given number or the number entered by the user. So if we say we want the factorial of 5, okay, so that means 5 is our n, so we're going to multiply until we get to 5 here. So then this will also be a multiplication. So we can then get the multiplication sum of all these, and that will be the factorial of 5. Then we can put the answer there. So this is what we're going to do with our C programming. Now to do that, as always, we're going to start by declaring some variable, okay? Variable declaration. So of type integer, so we got int n and then I, okay? Now the reason we are already declaring I, because we're going to use I in either for loop or while loop, depending of which one we find better for in this case. So after that, we can then ask the user to enter a number. Please enter a number. Now the user is going to enter a number. We then need to compute that number or process the number using the scanf function that the user is going to be entered. So since the number is going to be an integer, so it's %d, okay, as we did with the previous tutorial, and then we're going to reference it there. Okay, so this one here is a comma, not a full stop. So at this point here, we already have the user, okay, being able to enter the number, and that number being held by the variable n. Now the variable I here will then be used in our loop. But at this point, we are able to handle the number that the user is going to enter. And then we need to process it and also display our result. But there is one variable missing. That's a variable that is going to be holding the result of the factorial of the number. Let's say n is that number. Okay, so which means we need to declare another variable. So unlike the previous one, we declare the sum to be an integer, okay? But the factorial, we have to declare it to be a different variable type, because an integer is limited to 32 bits. But we need a number, the variable, to be able to hold a large number. Because as you know, multiplication usually yields larger numbers, larger result than additions. So in that case, how a variable that is going to be holding the factorial of the said number will be an unsigned, okay, an unsigned long, and we can name it as fact, like that. So this unsigned long is going to be equal to 64 bit of size. So that is actually 8 byte, and 8 byte is going to be 64 bits of memory space that will be allocated. So now that we've got that part sorted, we can then go ahead and start computing what we want to do. So let's put a little bit of comment here, and then we need to make sure that if the user enter a negative number, we must display an error, because there is no factorial of a negative number. In other words, the factorial of a negative number does not exist. So if the user enter a negative number, we must be able to tell them to please enter a positive number. Okay, the comment here can just be checking the input number. So we're going to say if n is less than 0. So you know that if n is less than 0, that means it is on the negative side. So if n is less than 0, then we need to print something here. So what are we going to print if n is less than 0? So we're going to say error. Okay, after we said error, and then we're just going to say factorial of a negative number, okay, doesn't exist. Just like that. So the factorial of a negative number does not exist. That's a warning that we are giving to the user if they enter a negative number. Now, if they don't enter a negative number, that means we need to compute something. So we then going to say else, okay, in case the number is positive, then we need to then work inside this else statement here. Now, what are we going to use here? We can use the for loop. So the for loop, we initialize it. Because we already declare I here, we can then go ahead and initialize I to be equal to 1. Because we don't want to be multiplying with 0 because it's going to defeat us. Because if you multiply by 0, you know you're going to get 0. So you have to initialize I to be equal to 1. Since I is equal to 1, we then checking I must be less or equal to the number that the user is going to enter, that is n. And then you have to increment I. Okay? Then inside the body of your for loop, you then need to do your magic. So your magic will then just be the factorial. So that will be the multiplication. Just as we did with the addition, it's the same formula that apply. So we just multiplying the previous number or the sum to the next number. Okay? And then we need to print the result into our screen. That is going to be not inside the for loop, but inside the else statement here. So we're going to say print f, and then we say factorial, okay, factorial of percentage d is equal to percentage. Now, since the number, the variable holding the factorial here is an unsigned long, so the format specifier for that is LLU. Just like that. And then we need then to pass the two variable here. So first is n, the factorial of n here, okay, and then is fact. Just like that. Then don't forget your semicolon there. Now we can go ahead and give it a test run. So let's see. Okay, let's try a simple number like 2. We know that the factorial of 2 is 2 because it's 1, 2. So it's 1 times 2 is equal to 2. So let's see. Boom. Factorial of 2. Okay, something is wrong. We're getting a very large number. Let's see where is a problem in our C code here. Okay, okay, we need to, in fact, we need to initialize the variable fact, because if we do not initialize the variable fact, after we compute our for loop here, there is a size, there is a value that is assigned into the variable. So if you do not initialize it, so that value is going to be just add up to whatever you are computing here and then display for some reason. So in order to avoid that, it is always important to initialize your variable. So let's just initialize fact here to be equal to 1, but we must not initialize it to be equal to 0. And then we can go ahead and run it again. Then the factorial of 2, there it is, the factorial of 2 is 2. So what is a factorial of 6? The factorial of 6 is 720. The factorial of 6 is 720. Let's try again. What is a factorial of 9? The factorial of 9 is 362. 362 is a factorial of 9. So it is a huge number, as you can see, and the number and our variable here long is able to hold that huge number. So that is it for this tutorial, guys. Thanks for watching. If you learned anything in this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to CMTEQ channel. Until next time, cheers.